we're going to start tough questions now. There's a bunch of major issues facing the province. There's a bunch of major issues facing the vast riding that you're running in. And there's a bunch of major issues facing this community. Now, we have a gathering of people from the city of Merritt here today. I'm going to ask you, first of all, after October 19th, and you're all looking forward to that day, I'm sure. After October 19th, just imagine you've been elected, you're one of 93 lucky MLAs that are going to go meet in Victoria. What is the first and most important thing that you're going to take to the legislature for the people of Merritt? Jonah, we'll start with you.
I think I'm going to stay seated for this part. The top priority for folks in Merritt that I've heard and that I've experienced myself is those ER closures that we're facing every single week with Interior Health. And so we desperately need healthcare reform in this province, and myself and the BC Greens don't think that privatization is the right way to go. We want to rethink how we do healthcare, and we are calling that the Dogwood model. Essentially, that really means we would open up healthcare centers throughout the province, which offer a holistic look at how we do healthcare. So when you go to the ER right now, when it's open, you're going to see a doctor, right? Whatever it is you go for, but that's not necessarily, you don't always need to see a doctor. You could see a nurse, or maybe you have a mental health crisis and you need to see a counselor. These community healthcare centers would offer holistic services for you to ensure that you are getting the care that you need where you need it. So whether that's in Merritt, or whether you're in Lillooet or Hope, that's the first thing that I'm going to see, and that's going to have tangible, direct effects for people living in Merritt right away.
Okay, thank you. Tony, what's number one?
What's number one? Well, I was just writing down, here's my note, and I go, healthcare is number one, ER closures, and number two is crime. And then I flipped it around, 1 and 2. Because we have to try to prioritize both of those things. And I think right now, with what's happening in our community, I think crime's going to be number one here that we need to deal with. And I'm talking about BC Housing, what they're doing in this community with opening these addiction facilities and these homes here in the community. I think the first thing I would do is I would go and find the housing minister, sit down with him and find out if there's a possibility, somehow we can do it, but close down these facilities here in this community. We cannot afford to have this crime happening right in our communities. So I'll be working with them in our community, finding a way that if at all possible, to be able to shut down some of these communities, because we can't have the crime that we're having in this community now. I'm not saying that we're the only community affected by this, but I believe that's probably a huge priority in our community. 1A is obviously the ER closures and the hospital and the healthcare, but I think right now how it's affecting our people and our kids and everything in this community, we've got to be looking at the crime situation.
Thank you. Francyne. You can stand or sit, it doesn't matter.
It helps me breathe. I think both those issues are incredibly important to this community and to this riding, and these are issues, sadly, we're facing across this province and across this country. So if I were elected, I think what I would want to bring to Victoria would be ensuring that the rural perspective is being brought to the table, because I feel we are too often forgotten. All the attention is brought to the urban centers, and we cannot be forgotten, because I think we are the backbone of this province.
Interestingly, I've been running around doing a bunch of these kind of events for the last week or so. Interestingly, a lot of the belief around where the election is going to get decided is not in Vancouver and Victoria. It's in the suburbs and the rural areas where there's potential for perhaps some disruption because the issues are different. And this province was built on diversity, and a lot of things that aren't getting talked about. So I think this riding's important. If I didn't, I wouldn't be here. And I live here, so that's important too. My next question, how do you bring back optimism for these people and prosperity to the riding? What would be your solution for that? Tony, we'll start with you.
I think we mentioned a couple already. The crime's an issue, the health system and the ER closures is a real issue within our community. But to bring back prosperity, we have some major issues around the economy here. Mr. Eby and his government has done all kinds of things to do anything but promote the revitalization of industry in this community. We have a hard time getting permits to cut lumber for our mill. Unfortunately, I met with the mill owner the other day, last week, and he's shutting down. He has no idea when it might be opened again. So we got to get our mills open, we got to get our mines open again, we got to get the things that are going to bring prosperity here. How do you have a $9 billion deficit, and it could go higher by the time this is all over? Well, you deal with those deficits and everything by having a strong economy. And right now, this government is not worried about having a strong economy. And we've got to get back there and concentrate on getting some jobs back and getting the forest industry working again and getting the mining industry. We got 17 mines in the pipeline that this government refuses to permit and get going. That is like $80 billion of economic activity into the government, into the GDP of the province. We've got to get those things out, bring hope back to people. You know, we're an aging community here, you know, and we've got to get children back in our community. How do you do that? Well, you bring young families here that are going to work in the forestry. And it's not just the forest industry. The forest industry represents lots of side jobs as well, right? Trucking and and woodcutters and all the kind of things that go along with that. So we need a very diversified economy. Unfortunately, this government has put that aside, and it's very obvious with the $9 billion deficit they're running up right now. We've got to generate revenue in our communities and get that going again.
I see a pattern here. Good, okay.
There's no pattern.
I think what we need is to have our communities working together as this government has been, I believe, in the past few years. And we need to come up with solutions and work towards having this optimism and this solution. I don't think one person has the answer. I don't see that if you were to elect me, that I could come to you and fix everything. I can't. I've been a mom, I've tried that, it doesn't work. But what I do want to see is that a government who understands and is addressing the issues across this whole province, that has a plan to continue addressing these issues. We've seen an increase in housing. We've seen an increase in doctors and nurses being hired. And that does mean that there's going to be a cost to us. But what is the cost to our province, to our community, if we have cuts? How are these cuts going to be determined? I see more cuts are going to have more unemployment, less infrastructure, less health care. So I want to work with a leader, with a government that has a plan and will work collectively with our communities and make sure that we are going on a path together and going forward in this province. Thank you.
Jonah, tell us how you're going to bring optimism and prosperity back to this community.
Yeah, the optimism piece is really interesting because what we've heard from the other parties is cuts or the status quo, and neither of those bring optimism to people. What the Greens and I would love to see is a government that invests in the people, a government that makes life more affordable for you. Tony mentioned getting permits approved, and that's great and all, but the courts have been very clear with the province that there are very important requirements to doing stuff on the land base in the 21st century. We are not in a situation anymore where we can just blanket approve cutting or mining. Like there are very important groups and First Nations and Indigenous organizations on the land who have rights and title on the land, and we need to be listening to them. And I think working with those communities is a fantastic way to bring life back into these rural communities. Indigenous communities are rooted in place, and that is how we bring back rural economies and optimism for people. Investing in people, making life more affordable, bringing back housing, and working with our Indigenous partners.
Thank you. You've all mentioned money. That's one thing that I think hasn't been talked about enough by any of your leaders in this campaign, because they're avoiding it. And rightly so. We have a $9 billion with a B, $9 billion annual deficit in this province. What's your solution to rationalizing that? And how do we get out of that deep hole that keeps getting bigger? You know, all these programs we talk about, we need to improve healthcare, we need to improve all these things. They all cost money. We're already in a pretty deep hole. If we put more weight on all of these folks, and by the way, $9 billion is over $1,000 per person per year in this province that we're going in debt. Okay? I don't know about you, but I don't have a spare $1,000 in my pocket right now.
It's not very big.
So, what's your solution? How do we rationalize the expenses of the government? What are we going to do? Or what's your solution to that massive deficit? And I don't expect you to have a solution that's going to happen in a week, a month, a year, or even in your term. But we have to start working towards it because it's a big issue. So tell me, what's your answer, Francyne? We'll start with you. I told you I wasn't going to be mean. I'm not going to ask any hard questions.
I mean, I remember Mr. Mike's used to be across the road from the Grand, and every month family allowance would come out, and they used to have the salad bar still back then. And my mom would take me out because I thought we were rich because we had $23 a month from family allowance. Boy, was I wrong as I grew older. Things are expensive. I thought by now I would own my own house, and it's difficult. I thought my kids would be much farther along. And I know it's hard. Interest rates, housing prices, the cost of food, daycare. Daycare used to freak me out. Because if you have one child, it's barely doable. Having two, you might as well stay home, right? We have had an increase in daycare seats in this community, thank goodness. But I agree, we need more. Because when we have daycare, we have parents who can work. We need to have more housing. I tried last year when I came back. I tried looking for housing here, and it was crazy. I couldn't believe the rents here. My employer is in Kamloops right now, so I'm living in Kamloops right now. I want to move back here. I want to fix my mom's house up again. Lumber is expensive. Contractor services are expensive. They're limited because we've gone through so much. What I want to see us do collaboratively is ensure that this burden is not just put on a few. It needs to be shared amongst us. We need to share in the hard times, and we need to work together for the good times. I've done work at food banks, and it's not easy. It's not easy to go to a food bank for help, but when you have kids, when you have parents, when your own stomach is grumbling, you need to do what you gotta do. And I feel that by working with the current government, they're understanding that these difficulties are across the board. We have seen an increase in our ICBC rates, which is still a little crazy. We have seen more jobs being in the apprenticeship in the trades, which then benefits our housing situation, our healthcare situation, our school buildings. And we have also seen an increase in our technological, there's more doctors and more nurses being trained. So there is a plan in place. We can't stop now. Because if we stop now, we're going to start to regress. And I'm afraid that if we regress, it's going to be so much harder for all of us. So I hope that we can continue to be part of this plan and work collectively, and that's one of the reasons that I'm running for the BC NDP. Thank you.
I'm going to ask you a follow-up. Not to be mean, but I'm going to ask you a follow-up. I didn't hear anything in there about reducing the deficit.
Well, I guess it's a part of, because we all know what happens when we make more money. We do pay more taxes. But taxes can go to a collaborative effort that helps everybody. So taxes are also applied to everybody. And my concern is that if we go ahead with with the John Rustad government, taxes aren't going to be equal. Because we have seen what has happened in the past, and it's been a select few that have been taxed, and it's been a more select few who have benefited. So we need to make sure that this issue of this deficit is being brought to the attention of all of us, and all of us are being dealt with the same hand. I can't see corporations making more money. I can't see those who are investing in rental properties making more money. We need to work together to address this deficit, and we need to make sure we are providing a hand up for those people who do need it, because we are seeing an increase of people who need our help, need these services, and if these services are cut, if we don't have the mental health supports, if we don't have the hospitals, because I've heard Mr. Rustad say he's cutting $4 billion, how do you cut $4 billion from a budget? Where is it coming from?
Bureaucrats.
Yeah, I wasn't asking how you cut $4 billion from the budget. I was asking how you cut $9 billion from the budget, and maybe more.
And I'm asking, who is that going to affect also? Because not everybody, unfortunately, has a job, right? We have people homeless for a reason. We have to look after our neighbors to some degree. And if we have more cuts, yes, our deficit's going to go down, and what's going to go up?
Tony, what's your solution to the massive deficit and rationalizing that budget?
Well, I don't have a solution personally, but I'm hoping that with an elected Conservative government on October the 19th, that we'll come up together with a solution on this thing. Look, it's not a $9 billion. I'm not going to stand up here and tell you people this is going to change overnight. It will not. This NDP government, don't forget, that's this year $9 billion. When this government started 7 years ago, it had a $5 billion surplus. So they burned through that. This isn't the first year for deficits. These deficits have been accumulating. They've doubled the debt in this province. How are we going to get rid of the debt? You look at yourselves individually. British Columbia's individually the most indebted individuals in Canada. So you know all about that. Your young people, some of us here probably don't have that issue. But you talk to your young people, they're living on their credit cards. They're living on their debt. They don't have the money. There's not the jobs. There's not the paying jobs that we need in this province. We're all going to work together. I agree with Francyne Joe there, that we're all going to work together to get over this. And they keep talking about cuts. There's two ways of reducing deficits. One is cuts. The other one is grow the freaking economy. This government has not done that. And we need to grow the economy. I can't stand listening to this. We're bringing cuts in this $4 billion. It's a lie from David Eby. It's not true. Every meeting I've had with John Rustad is we're adding money to the system because we've got to add more before we get better. We have a bloated bureaucracy in the healthcare. That needs to be changed. We need to get those. Did you know that 40% of our nurses are doing administration work? That's why you're not getting the service at the hospital. This is ridiculous. Sitting up here and telling us that we're cutting. We're not cutting. And it's going to be a little bit painful in the first year. This isn't going to disappear in the first year, but we need to get this economy rolling. We have terrible productivity. We're not training enough people. We're not training enough nurses. It was the NDP government years ago that took seats away from the university because they didn't want to pay for the graduates from there. Check, if you don't believe me, go and have a look. This has got to change moving forward. This rhetoric about us cutting, it's not there, folks. Don't believe it. It's a lie from Mr. Eby.
Spicy. I like spicy. Yeah. That's good. Jonah, you can follow that however you like.
Yeah, I guess I'll start with saying I don't know how you take $4 billion out of the provincial budget and don't cut. Like those are services. I think Sonia and Premier Eby both said John Rustad can't be very good at math this morning on the radio debate because that math just doesn't add up. How do you remove $4 billion from a budget without providing cuts? But that wasn't the question. And I'm not going to try to rationalize the spending of the NDP either. I do think it's important, though, that we acknowledge that we had a global pandemic in this province, which caused a lot of extra spending to ensure that fewer people ended up homeless. And yet, here we are with a lot of people homeless. You'll also notice that the BC Conservatives aren't actually offering a solution. They're saying we're going to cut $4 billion and it's magically not going to affect services. But how does that work, right? But really, the BC Greens have at our centre people. And to rationalize the expenses of government, whether or not you're reducing that deficit, you need to keep people at the center. Because if people are feeling like they're getting adequate services for the taxes they pay, they will be more glad to pay them. If we have amazing healthcare, if we have doctors in our ERs, if our roads are well maintained, I am happy to pay my taxes. But it's when my ERs are closed, when I have to drive 2 hours for my wife to give birth to my daughter, that's when I start getting upset that I'm paying taxes.
Thank you. I love the energy. These people are excited about this election thing, it seems. I don't know. Getting warmed up. Got lots of time still. We'll get this thing fired up. Okay. And we had a comment about this and a couple of other comments about it, but this is a question that one of our attendees asked. What's your party's plan to ensure that our healthcare system is fully staffed and that our community no longer has to travel an hour plus for care due to emergencies and our emergency room closures that I found out today that there's 32 more of them planned, which is really exciting. We heard a little bit about this already from Francyne, but I'm going to go back to Tony. Tony, what's your party's plan to ensure that healthcare is fully staffed and that we don't have to deal with these ongoing closures of emergency rooms and we don't have to drive 2 hours to have a baby?
Well, first of all, I just want to clarify again with Jonah that we are not cutting I don't know where this number 4.1 comes from. We're not cutting. We're going to be adding to the healthcare plan. We have to do that to begin with. And then we're going to go through and do a thorough investigation into the healthcare system. Can I ask who here is happy with IHA? Nobody. Do you think they're part of the problem or part of the solution? I think they're part of the problem. We got to have a look in that instance is look at the way the healthcare system functions in this province and how it's run and the administration. Let me just give you one stat to tell you where I'm coming from in the administration. We don't have to cut. We can just change up the way we do things in here. Germany, which is twice the population of Canada, has 1/10 of the administrators in its system that we have in Canada. I already told you, 40% of our nurses are doing admin work. We have to change the system. I was thinking about it today, healthcare. I went up in the dictionary today and looked up insanity, and it had Canadian healthcare in there as an example. We continue to throw money, continue to do the same things with no different results. 85% of the provincial budget is what? Healthcare, education, and social services. We can't, that's taking up a huge amount of money. So what you have to do is you have to get the economy running, you got to get good jobs, you got to collect more taxes, and all those kind of things, get things going. We got to go in and do a clean sweep of healthcare in the province. John has admitted, and we're admitting, I think people here in this room have finally realized that maybe our healthcare system isn't the best in the world. We're the second most expensive, but all our results are at the bottom. They're the floor. 25 out of 26 of the OECD countries and everything. Our results are horrible. But we just want to throw more cash and bury our heads in the sand and think nothing is wrong with our system. We've got to change the system, folks. I've been listening to this for 30 years. We all knew this day was coming. But we sat by it and done nothing. You know what I like about John Merritt? People say, why do you like running for the Conservative, John Merritt said? Because he's not afraid to have the difficult conversations where every other politician buries their heads and run when you say, let's talk about it. And they say, well, we don't want to have an American healthcare system here. What are we talking about? Go to Europe and look at the systems there. I just gave you the stat on the German system. They have a system where it's a universal healthcare system, so I hear anybody about privatizing me tonight, I'm going to scream. We're not going to privatize the system. We're going to have a single user payer, universal system, but you know what? We're going to have a blend of government and non-government people to do this thing. And I just might try to convince John to bring back private healthcare insurance because it's illegal right now, but maybe a nice blend of some private insurance would really help us out too in those moments when I got to go get an MRI somewhere. But here's the hypocrisy of this government. They despise the American system, but they take $16 million of your money and pack us some patients and send it into Washington State. That's the height of hypocrisy as far as I'm concerned.
Now,
the room not warm enough for you guys?
it's not. It's getting fun though. I'm starting to enjoy this. While we're on the subject of healthcare, there's a couple of questions in my stack of questions about the unique needs of seniors with regard to healthcare. Many of our seniors would like to age in place. How do we do that?
Well,
how do we support them?
You know, I'd like to be able to have all the answers on that one, but I just received the seniors policy yesterday and haven't had real time to fine-tune me on, but we're certainly looking at the way we do it. And part of our policy is to allow seniors to age in place, stay in their own homes. My mom's 95, and guess where she is? She's in my home. I got a basement suite. She lives in my basement suite. She's still very healthy in that respect, and I think that's part of it. We need to look at different ways of doing things like that. We will provide more funding for that as well, more home care service. We want to provide some more funding. We want to look after some of the seniors as well. We're going to be providing, we're often called anti-vaxxers, but we will provide the shingle vaccines free of charge to all seniors in the province. Those are just some of the things that we need to do in this province to make sure our seniors are well taken care of.
Thanks. Jonah, we're going to come back to you.
Exciting.
And fun.
Very fun, Darcy.
So tell us about healthcare.
I've mentioned healthcare a little bit here already. The community healthcare model is how the Greens are planning on ensuring that our healthcare centers are fully staffed. And like Tony was saying, a lot of our nurse time and a lot of our doctor time, for instance, is spent on doing administrative tasks. 30% of doctor time is spent scheduling and managing who's going to be in the clinic and who's going to be in the ER on any given day. And so our plan would really implement, it would make administrative professionals available for doctors and nurses so that they don't have to think about how they're organizing themselves. That's the administrative professional's job. And that will free up time for the doctors and nurses to do things that only they can do, surgeries and taking care of us. To go back to, again, there's a bit of double speak with the BC Conservatives. It's not privatization, it's just non-government spending. I don't know what non-government spending is other than privatization, but we'll set that, we'll have another conversation later. But going back to your follow-up question around seniors, the BC Greens want to top up the rural long-term care and assisted living. We want to make sure that seniors are able to live in place, and we also want to ensure that, in Merritt, the hope is that you are able to get 95% of your care done in Merritt. But there are some very specialized problems that come up when we get into our old age that requires us sometimes to go to a larger center, Kelowna, Vancouver, and so the BC Greens want to improve and add funding to that program to help seniors travel, either flight or car or bus, however you need to get to where you need to go. The BC Greens want to ensure that the government is there to take care of you and ensure that you can get there safely and worry-free, so that the only thing you need to worry about is your surgery.
Thank you. This wasn't really intended to be a fierce debate, but it's kind of fun. Francyne, you mentioned healthcare earlier. You brought it up first, so I'm going to let you go last. So, what are we going to do to fix the problems, particularly in places like Merritt where we have all these ER closures? And as the follow-up, what are we going to do to help seniors?
In our community here, in Indigenous communities, it's always been expected, but it's not really, it's a responsibility we have to our elders to take care of them. My apologies for not standing up. I'm shaking, I am passionate about this here. But getting back, healthcare for seniors is incredibly important. I lost my grandfather because he didn't feel comfortable. It wasn't just about he didn't have a doctor, because Dr. McLeod is a wonderful doctor, and he's seeing my mother right now. But we need to ensure it's not just healthcare at end of life, as we get older, and we should be enjoying our time with our kids. I'm 54 years old. I'm part of that sandwich generation. Trying to look after my mom, trying to look after my kids. And it's tough out there, and I get it. I really get it. And when I hear that our seniors aren't getting the care that they deserve, our seniors who have built this community, who have fought for us to have the right to vote, and they're living on the streets, they're living with mental health issues, they're not even able to put food on the table that will help them continue to have a healthy life. It's very hard for me to hear. And I'm hoping that while I might not have all the answers, I've said that before, this riding will do whatever it takes to look after each other. And that's what I come back to here, is, well, I might not be able to make a promise that I'm going to be able to deal with this right away. I am not going to forget about our seniors. I am not going to forget about our young people. And I'm going to do my very best to make sure that one way or another, we get the services that we deserve. And it might be thinking outside the box. I don't know if you've heard, Hope has a virtual system of healthcare and a in-person form of healthcare. I think we need to consider how can we look outside the box to meet the needs of our people. 6, 7 years ago, we didn't expect to be having meetings virtually. Now I think we need to consider what are the options that we can deal with and that will meet our needs as a community. Cookchan.
Thank you. Okay, another fun question. They're all fun, aren't they? They're all fun. Aging infrastructure. Easy one, right? I'm gonna lob you a softball here, and I'm gonna wait for you to hit it out of the park. So, we all know, well, maybe we don't all know, but we all should know that the infrastructure right here in Merritt, for example, our water supply line, our sewage system, all that kind of stuff that we depend on every day, is aging. And we've seen in the news massive failures of infrastructure in other cities. What part of rehabilitating and upgrading vital infrastructures, and this doesn't include local services, but highways, bridges, that sort of thing, do you see as a responsibility for you as an MLA? And what solutions would you put forth if you were elected? Focus on the solution. Francine, we'll start with you. I know you're writing feverishly, just to make it fun.
That was a little preamble to that question, Darcy.
Yeah, well, that's a big question.
Well, I think for one, responsibility of the MLA is to be part of a community and hearing the issues all around the whole riding. And as we said earlier, it's a big riding. And I have been doing my best over the last few weeks to hear the issues that have been raised in all parts, all corners of this riding. And I keep track of those because I am not in every community every day, so I don't know exactly what's going on. I'm not an engineer. I am not an auditor or an accountant, but I do understand as a woman, as a mother, that you need to plan for the future because things are going to happen. And if you don't have the money in place to look after that, you are SOL. So I'm hoping that as I go around this riding of Fraser-Nicola, talking to people, understanding what the infrastructure, we saw what happened obviously with the Coquihalla Highway. I thought the Coquihalla Highway was one of the best highways ever built. It was only built in 1986. I was devastated when I saw what happened to the Coquihalla Highway. When I drive down to Spence's Bridge and I see what is happening on the other side of the Shakin First Nation, that highway is gone. When I drive from Lytton to Lillooet, if you've ever driven that route, just outside of Lillooet, it gets really narrow and you see that river really close. It's a little scary. And these are some of the issues that we need to deal with. We also know that some of our buildings are quite old. They need to be, if nothing else, repurposed. We need to ensure that we are looking after our environment to ensure that just even the water that's coming into our communities is clean, healthy water so that we don't need to treat it so much, so that we can be focused on growing the fruits, the vegetables, and taking care of ourselves. So I think that those are just some of the solutions. These are going to be part of pre-planning and budgeting. And if I have any questions, I know exactly where to come to. And those are the people who know better than I do. So I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
Thank you. Tony, infrastructure.
Infrastructure. Well, when I was on council, that was one of our big concerns. I think we have a huge infrastructure deficit here in our community. So one of the things I'm committed to doing here is advocating for the cities within our community. It's a tall order for infrastructure. Too many past governments, I'm not putting blame on any, they're all at fault, have not taken care of the infrastructure in our community, but we're not unique. every jurisdiction around the world, is that because they've spent too much money on other things that they send as more important, but our infrastructure is failing everywhere, all over North America. So in here, but I'll tell you, so one of our commitments John has made in policy is that we're committing $1 billion annually to infrastructure upgrades in communities around the province. That's not a lot of money. I'm thinking what our infrastructure deficit is here in our community alone, and Mayor Getz could correct me on this, but I think we're about 150 million just in our community alone. Is that close, Mayor Getz, somewhere in that area? Plus or minus a few, so $1 billion does not go very far. One of the things our government will not do is mandate to cities to build more housing without the infrastructure. That was a bad policy. We cannot go there. I mean, I remember on council, we'd approve a new subdivision. Of course, what's always the thing? Where's the water coming from, right? And that's a legitimate question. And so we've got to make sure that the infrastructure within our community is sound and ready to go. And then we'll work about that whole piece about improving and increasing the densities within our community. Places like Merritt are struggling with that. So we're committed to, for over the next 10 years, $1 billion towards infrastructure in the community, and everybody's going to be rushing to get that. So get your grants in quick on that one. But we want to make sure that we can improve the infrastructure. Without infrastructure, we have nothing. We can't improve forestry, we can't improve mining, we can't do all the things that we want to do within this province if we don't have strong infrastructure. We've got to make a focus on it. Politicians, local, even us at our level, we've got to, I think I remember used to say when I was on council, you know what, the politician does not like to be seen with his arm around a piece of water pipe. It's not sexy, right? If I go to a playground that we just says, that's sexy, we've got to make sure that our infrastructure is sexy, that the local politicians and the provincial politicians may emphasize that that's a really important piece to making our communities healthy and strong. Infrastructure is not just, but new schools, new water treatment plants, all those things, that's infrastructure that we need to make sure it's healthy in our community.
Thank you. And I'll come back to what I said at the beginning when I introduced myself. And I'm not an engineer, I'm not a professional, I'm not a registered professional, anything. But that's not my job as an MLA. My job is to listen and make sure that I am advocating for you when I talk to the Minister of Transportation or when I talk to the Minister of Municipal Affairs. And so that's like one of the pieces that previous MLAs that I've spoken to have really shown success is having regular meetings and being in community. And thankfully our riding is it's a huge riding either way. And for me in Lillooet to get down to Victoria, I'm going to have to be driving through that canyon, and I'm going to be driving to Coquihalla regularly. So I'm going to be talking and meeting with all of you regularly throughout the year, and I'm going to have my own personal experiences of what the highway is like, or what the bridges is like, or what the highway between Merritt and Spence's Bridge is like, and why has it taken several years to do that. And part of that comes from listening to all of you and working with the contractors and the people who are actually working on the road themselves. And so, what is my personal responsibility for the infrastructure? I think that goes back to what I said about taxation. When people are seeing the benefits of their taxes, whether that's good roads, good highways, good bridges, excellent water infrastructure, enough to build new subdivisions, that's when people start to think, well, yeah, hey, maybe the government is doing okay and my taxes are being used well. And that's something that I often hear from mayors and municipal councils that I meet with is the province has downloaded too much responsibility onto the councils and hasn't given them adequate powers of revenue generation. And so what I would love to see and what I would advocate for is for a rebalance and a rethink of how the province manages those property taxes, and I would love to see more of it go back to municipalities so that they can properly manage themselves at the local level without having to come to the province for grants. I think having regular revenue streams is a much better way to plan for the future and to be able to actually manage and think about how are we going to staff, how are we going to build out cities like Merritt without having to think, well, maybe we'll have to wait on that because we might not get the grant.
Thank you. I'm going to shift gears a little bit here. Merritt's traditionally an industry-based town. We all agree with that, I'm sure. What's your position on what we can do to help forestry, mining, ranchers, lots of ranchers in this area that I'm sure would love some drought assistance, things like that. What are your thoughts on what we can do to improve the environment for our industry and the working people in this area? Who wants to go first? Nobody? Jonah, go ahead.
Supporting the natural resource industries and folks who work in that is a central part of the BC Green policy, and it's something that's really close to my heart, coming from, my family. We were loggers and ranchers in Clinton and Clearwater, and so I see the need for that in these rural communities, and it's true. Forestry's taken a hit in this province, and I believe that that's because of previous government mismanagement of those resources. We were cutting too much for too long and not thinking about the long-term sustainability for how do we keep these places in place for generations to live in. We were thinking about short-term profits, and so that's what I and the BC Greens believe, is we need to start thinking about what are the long-term ideas and how do we make sure that Merritt and Lillooet can remain forestry communities going into the future. And I think part of that is working more closely with First Nations and ensuring that they have a more equitable share of the resources in the territory, because right now it is an abysmally small portion of, take for instance, forestry, of the annual allowable cut that goes to First Nations companies. It's all going to Aspen, and there's a large piece of relationship that those companies aren't facing. And sure, we can say government needs to approve more permits, but on the other hand, I think those companies need to really work on their relationship with the rights and title holders on the land as well. And so you mentioned ranchers as well, and one thing that the Greens want to do, and I would advocate for, is creating we're calling them watershed stewardship councils. And essentially this is local producers getting into a meeting room together with First Nations and local government and municipalities, and ensuring that we understand, or that they understand, and they are managing the resource locally without the province needing to get too involved. And so that includes storage, that includes voluntary cutbacks on watering during periods of drought, because unfortunately we are now in a place where we are getting drought every year on some of our watersheds, and that needs to be managed at a local level to ensure that the people that those regulations and those policies are affecting are the ones making them, not somebody from Victoria.
Thank you. Francyne, that's a very thoughtful look.
It's a very thoughtful question. You're right. When we think of Merritt specifically, we are very much an industry-based community. I grew up Nicola Campers right below Craigmont Mine, and a lot of my friends, their parents, their fathers especially, worked at Craigmont Mine until that closed. And when I flew over that area 2 years ago, coming from Vancouver to Kamloops, and to see how close the fire got, not just to Craigmont Mine, but to Lower Nicola, I was shocked. I was saddened. I just couldn't believe that such a situation could happen in the community that I had grown up in. Working at my current employer with First Nations Emergency Services, we have seen the effects of drought. And we came into 2024 with a province-wide drought that we saw about 20% water in the community. We knew this was going to happen. But it's a matter of how can we be proactive with items such as fire, such as flood. When the floods came through Merritt with the atmospheric river, we saw so much land being washed away. But the land that was left behind there were toxins also left behind because of the flood. And as we move forward in this community, we need to address how we can fix those, what we can do as an individual, and what we can do as a community, and what we will do as a provincial government and as a federal government, because it's not just all on one entity. So what I'm hoping to do, and what I'm hearing from neighbors, is that they need help. And this help is going to come in the forms of organizations working to help with them, funding coming to help with them, but at the end of the day, it's our own community that's going to help these industries improve. It's also going to take some consideration, and while I have great respect for my colleague, I do wonder, where are we going with the government when its leader doesn't believe in climate change? Because there's a reason for this drought happening. There's a reason why these fires are getting so big. And it didn't happen in just 2 or 3 years. This has been something that's been taking a while to do, and we haven't been addressing it. And now, with this NDP government, we are addressing environmental concerns and climate change, and we are working with communities to make a difference. And I think we need to continue making that difference. Otherwise, we are going to be in a worse situation just months, not years, months down the road. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Well, just to clarify something about climate change, I'm not a climate change denier. I think climate change is real. It's been happening for eons. It might have accelerated a little bit. The jury's still out with me about exactly how much anthropomorphic change is happening as well. That's meaning you and I, what effect we're having on it. So that thing. But it's really, really interesting. If the NDP were so concerned about the climate, why did they steal our carbon tax removal policy and put that in? Mr. Eby has decided to take that from our policy, one of many policies that he's taken from us. But what would I do for the forest industry here is that there's a lot of things we can do to help get the forestry. It was just the forestry, right, Darcy? It's been a while since I heard the question.
Forestry mining
and those things. So one of the things we want to do in forestry, especially, is accelerate the permitting process. It's been lagging. It hasn't been. You talk to any mill. You look at Canford, who just shut down, and I think it was 250 people thrown out of work up there because they cannot get access to fiber. Fiber runs mills. Do you know what the value of all the mills in the province is right now? You know why? There's going to be scrap value, but there's no value in the mills. And why is that? Because they don't. Do you want to go buy a mill that you can't get fiber to run through it?
We're out of trees.
Trees are going to lower, but we can fix that by proper forestry management. There's no question about that. We need proper forestry management. That hasn't been happening. Why are we having wildfires? Because we've had poor. In 2017, one of the MPs in the House of Commons, sorry, I'm going to federal for a minute, told the people in Jasper they need to have better wildfire management. 2017, and they did nothing about it. We have the same issues here in the province. We've got to have better wildfire and forest management for sure. So we got to reduce some of the regulations around that. We need to have more partnerships with First Nations in the community as well. John has made a commitment to share the resources, especially around forestry, with them. And that's happening. It's going to happen more and more. That's a very, very important piece we have to make it successful here. We need certainty in the forest and the mining industry, and we've got to get those agreements in place as soon as possible to make it possible for everybody here. We need the revenue. We need the revenue, going back to a previous question, to pay down the debt. Stop these huge deficits that are putting in debt. I was just trying to do a calculation on how much interest do we pay monthly or annually on the debt alone. We need the revenue from our forest and our mining industries to help pay for that, right? So one of the things would be definitely the work in town, reducing some red tape, better forestry manage. We also put a policy forward that we're going to be reviewing the stumpage fee, the way that is done, make it more market sensitive, and fixing the stumpage fee, because especially after forest fire, we should be on the ground within 6 months cutting those burned trees down because they're rotting in the field. Because the permitting process hasn't been there, we lost that number. That's wrong. That's waste. That's just waste going on there. We can take some of that timber and remill that and get that going. So we've got to be a lot more proactive. Around wildfires, one of the things that John Russell, the Conservative government, has committed to is if you want to look after your property in a wildfire, we're going to find a way to get that done. We're going to have to work through the liability issue, we're going to do the training, and we're going to supply you with equipment. It's about time you're allowed to protect your own property. I'm tired of the government telling us what they can and cannot do. So that's going to be part of it as well. That's part of that wildfire and that forestry management piece.
I'm curious, Tony, you saying speeding up the permitting process makes me think that you've never actually seen a cutting permit before in your life, because having worked with cutting permits, those already go through as fast as possible. But what we forget is that the government has a legal requirement to do consultation with First Nations on the land base, and that relationship is more important than the economy.
Sorry, I've got to say something else with you. Tony, I do have great respect for Tony here. However, I don't trust your leader because I have concerns. We have been working so hard with the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and I have not heard any real support. I've heard this. I haven't heard actual going out to First Nations, making sure that First Nations are being consulted. In fact, the Union of BC Indian Chiefs just denounced Mr. Rustad because they have no trust in Mr. Rustad's government. And he's said he's basically going to tear up DRIPA. How is that partnerships? I'm really concerned about what someone says and what someone has done in the past.
I didn't know, but it's fun.
So one of the interesting things about what they said there, and it's true, I think all governments are lagging on that piece with the First Nations. We've got to get that fixed because there's uncertainty in the marketplace right now. There's uncertainty with you as landowners. It's uncertainty with them as landowners. It's not working what we have in here. Now the nice thing about partnering with John Rustad, and yeah, he's saying some things about that. Some of those things aren't working. John Rustad has negotiated more agreements than anybody with the First Nation than anybody else in this country. 435 of them. I'd rather go to bat with John Rustad as negotiating agreements with the First Nations here than any other leader in this country, never mind within the province. So I think he knows what he needs to do here moving forward and getting this unstuck. And we're in an election. People are going to say things. There's no question about that and take their angle. But you know what? I'm ready to work with John on this thing and get these things fixed as quick as we can.
Hopefully it doesn't offend all of you, but maybe it will. All three of you have party leaders that have said some really stupid shit.
Thank you, Darcy. And we also have some candidates that said some stupid things as well.
Yes. So, as much as you might want to berate each other about your party leaders, they're taking care of their own stupidity, so let's just let them do that. This whole stack of questions from all of the constituents that are here tonight are all about the same thing. And we're going to come back to DRIPA in a minute because you guys brought it up. But that's not what this is. Right, that's a different question. We'll get back to that. I'm going to talk about that. But what we're going to talk about first is public safety. This whole stack of questions right here are all regarding public safety. It's a huge concern, and some of you know where I live in this community, and it's right in the middle of town. And I don't have to worry about my recycling because it doesn't ever get picked up by the recycling truck. It gets picked up by other people, which is fantastic. I don't mind. They can have that. That's my support for them every week. But what are you going to do? How are you going to improve the feeling of safety for a mom and her kids walking through the city of Merritt, or somebody that has to, make their way through town? How does it look to tourists? And we're not just talking about Merritt; it's everywhere. but we're in Merritt, so I want to talk about Merritt. So what are you and your party going to do about public safety and the growing crime on the streets that we're seeing? Who wants to start? Francine's going to start. She put up her hand.
That's because public safety has been something that really brought me into the political realm. It was in 1978 on my birthday that my cousin, Monica Jack, disappeared. I was going to Kamloops for a party with my friends, so we would have been grade 2 at that time. And my cousin was leaving Colchana to ride her bike to Merritt. And she barely got past the golf course. And it took years for us to find her remains. And I remember this community pulling together to look for this 13-year-old girl, my cousin. The police officers involved did everything they can. I have no doubt about that. They were committed to finding Monica. It took over 10 years to find her, and it took until 2014 before our police were able to have a case against the man who did this to her. And I was at that courthouse in Vancouver, and I watched this gentleman, actually this man, he wasn't a gentleman. I watched this man sit in the witness box there, fixing his headset, his hearing aid, not understanding that he had repercussions. He needed to be punished for what he did. He was found guilty, and now he's appealing it. And that was why I went to Ottawa to make sure that this missing and murdered Indigenous women's inquiry, which started way back in the 2000s, had some kind of community involvement, had grassroots involvement to it. And it's been a passion of mine for years. So when we're looking at the safety in our community, I understand this. And it's not just the safety at night, it happens during the daytime. It happens to our kids, it happens to our elders. And it's not just putting more police out there, it's a matter of us looking out for ourselves, looking out for each other, ensuring that we are being respectful to the people who are part of this community. And we don't push off the problems to another community. We need to deal with it here. And I want to ensure that as we move forward, as the city grows, because we have grown significantly, that we keep each other accountable. We keep our governments, both local, both provincial and federally, accountable in looking out for us and us looking out for them. And we need to have the finances to ensure safety programs are in place, transportation is in place, housing is in place, and on the bigger scale, our justice system is doing what needs to be done. Because it's not going to be just one police officer, it's not going to be just one family, it's going to be a whole system that needs to be looked at in addressing the safety of our children, of our women, of our elders, of our whole community. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to surprise you.
Jump up. Oh, I'm sorry, Jonah. Go ahead, you started now.
Okay, I'm sorry. No. Thanks, Darcy. I'm going to surprise you. I agree with a number of the points that Francine has made here. There's so many issues to this. Since I've been running and everything, people come out, what is your solution? And I said, quite frankly, I don't know. Does anybody here have an answer to all the problems? I think we're going to have to find band-aids, we're going to have to fix this, we're going to have to do, but there is some simple things that we have to do, I think. We got to break the EB-Trudeau alliance that has allowed this to happen by decriminalizing drugs and allowing that to proliferate our communities. Safe supply is not a safe supply. It's not a safe supply if the drugs are taken and given and sold to our young kids and getting them addicted to the problem. That is not safe supply. That's got to be changed. There's no question about that. And I want to tell you right now, it's not the police's problem. When I was on council, people came to me and said, hey, we need more police. I said, no, we don't. I can call any officer right now and say, round them up. They'd have them all rounded up in 5 minutes. They know who they are. They know where they are. But it's the justice system that's broken. It's not dealing with the So we made a commitment that we're going to be looking at this, stop the revolving door. Police officers haven't even got their paperwork done and they're back out on the street. That's not right. One of the other platforms that Francyne's leader has taken from us is involuntary treatment. He liked that. He took it from us. Yes, it was our policy, involuntary treatment. Why are your rights suffering because somebody else has rights to do drugs in front of a school or in a hospital? That is not right. So what we have said, we're going to have involuntary treatment on those and take those people and put them somewhere. Not at Knights Inn, not at the Desert Inn, anywhere here. We're going to have to build facilities somewhere, not in your neighborhood, not near a school, not near a hospital, but we have to do what we need to do. Fix that problem. We have to go on involuntary treatment and people have to have the help that they need to do this. All the wraparound services. Portland tried this. All this government had to do is go down and talk to Portland, who are within days of shutting down their system because they realize if we have open drug use on our streets, in front of our schools, and in front of our hospitals, and we're the only jurisdiction in the United States that does this, guess what? They're all going to come to Portland. They weren't prepared, they didn't have the wraparound services and everything they need to do. We've got to be able to provide that. That's going to be a big cost for you, the taxpayer. You're going to have to cover it. We've got to have a strong economy that's going to pay for this. So there's linkages all along that need to be looked at. You need a government that's going to have a great vision, a good vision, and try to put all these pieces together because there is no simple answers. And if somebody's got a simple answer for me tonight, I would love to hear it because there is nothing simple.
Just before you jump in, I know that we're over time.
I thought that was the last question.
It's probably not. It's probably not, unless all these people want to leave. I'm happy to stay and ask a few more questions and have these guys answer a few more questions as long as you are. So, Jonah, go ahead.
Thank you. And you'll hear a lot of agreement from the three parties on this because one thing that we've found is there is a public safety committee in the legislature in Victoria, and it is all three parties sit on it, and we should really be depoliticizing public safety because it is so important to all British Columbians. It doesn't matter who you vote for, we all want to be safe and we want to live in safe communities. But involuntary care doesn't work. Like when you look at the people coming out of involuntary care, 97% of them are going to end up back on the street, back doing crime, back doing drugs. And so instead of building up this new involuntary care system, really I think we should be building up and supporting our voluntary care system first, because right now there is a months-long wait to get into rehab if you want to, let alone people who don't want to be there. And then it's just going to cost the taxpayers a ton of money, it's not going to be very successful, and you're still going to end up with people on the street. And so what the BC Greens have provided is we want to provide a safer supply, not providing fentanyl and hard drugs, but other alternatives that are regulated by pharmaceutical companies to ensure that people are not giving money to big crime, that is being provided by the government, which then decreases the likelihood that you're going to have large gangs and large criminal cartels operating in our cities, because there's going to be no market for people buying those drugs, because, well, they're going to get it somewhere else. And you're going to see a decrease in crime, and then also it's about providing those holistic services. Even if you do provide involuntary care, where are they going to go after they get out? If you don't have housing for them, if you don't have those wraparound supports, they're going to end up back on the streets again. And so again, it's a holistic view of the problem. Like Tony said, it's not simple. We need to be providing houses for these people. We need to be providing houses for everyone in BC, really. But we want to keep them off the street. We want to keep our streets safe. There's another way to do it other than sacrificing constitutional rights of people and ensuring that those people are actually taken care of, instead of being involuntarily taken off the street and then they end up back on the street 3 or 6 months later.
Thank you. So, everybody's okay with sticking around for a little bit? You guys all want to keep beating up on these guys? Should I be nicer or meaner?
Hey, you didn't ask us first.
You guys are suckers. You put your names forward to run for this position, so I know that you're going to stick around as long as there's people here, because you need their votes. So, are you guys okay to stay? All right, I thought so. And shift gears completely. I've got a couple of questions that are related, and I'm going to have a little preamble here. You guys have said, all three of you, that this is a huge riding, and it's a beautiful riding. There's all kinds of outdoor things to do, see, recreation opportunities, backcountry camping, fishing, hiking, mountain biking. In Merritt, we have a very active community and lots of opportunities for that as well. We've got a great mountain biking club, a great snowmobile club. We've got all kinds of things going on here. What is your position on making sure that those opportunities continue to be available and can be expanded? And one of the questions was in particular to access to Crown lands for backcountry recreation. So how do we enhance that opportunity for recreation? And by the way, it attracts a lot of people to the area. How do we enhance those opportunities? And what's your position on backcountry access for recreation uses? Tony, you go first.
How are we going to enhance this area so we can get tourism and all those things that are making this area one of the best areas to live in the province? Because we have, as I said before, we have rainforests down here, we have canyonlands, we have grasslands, we have all those areas, and how do we enhance that and make that better for all of us? Well, I think that's part of it is having a strong economy, having people that can afford to live here, having people that can afford to have jobs, that run businesses without all the regulatory red tape and all those kind of things that we have here in our small community here, making sure we have a strong thriving forestry industry, mining industry, all those kind of things. Because there's no one thing. As the old saying goes, it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a strong economy to have a strong community as well. And that, I don't think there's any doubt about that. It goes everything from healthcare to low crime and all those kind of things we have to have in our community, right? Access to backcountry land, I think this is a huge concern. I'm hearing it at the doors, on all the door knocking I'm doing, as people are concerned about what's happening through now with First Nations and that. And so what we need to do, and I think I mentioned earlier, is we've got to get these negotiations finished because there's uncertainty out there. There's people that are upset with what's happening. They see some things happening that they're not comfortable with. You know, it's okay to make changes over a long period of time, slow changes and baby steps and all that kind of thing. But when you do things like that, people are concerned. They don't see things coming. They don't know how things are going to turn out. Right? You know, with this government, I mean, they turned the running of Haida Gwaii, I don't think that's the word I want to use, but the legislation of Haida Gwaii over to the First Nations there and everything. And of course, the first thing you have, what about us? What's going to happen to our rights and everything here? So we've got to get these negotiations done and taken care of. We've got to bring certainty back to the problem. That's going to help us. That is going to secure, through these negotiations, hopefully, backcountry entry around the province. We've got to make sure we can have. This is a big, beautiful province that we all get to enjoy. All of us get to enjoy. We've got to be a community here. We've all got to work together. It's time we all sat down at the table to get some of these things taken care of, because if we don't, I just don't know what's going to happen in the future if we don't take care of some of these things that need to be done. So yeah, we have a great province, as I've said. I'm going to be very proud to represent one end of it all the way to the other end. So I'm really excited about that.
Jonah, what are your thoughts?
Accessing Crown land is something I hear a lot about in Merritt, in Hope, in Lillooet. There are people who want to come to our part of the province and see the beauty that we get to see every day. It's fantastic. Something that we need to ensure is done, though, is make sure that it's done in the right way, that it's done respectfully for the land and for the people who live there as well. And so I would love to see, in the BC Greens, want to see more land use planning put into the province to ensure that we have parts of the province and the forest that are, working parts of the forest. And then we have areas for recreation and conservation. And so we really want to be working closely with local groups, tourism, First Nations, the province, municipalities, to ensure that we are adequately planning and placing places for people to go and act respectfully on the land, and ensure that through partnership with First Nations and through municipalities and local organizations, that there are proper stewards and people taking care of the land and ensuring that our visitors are doing the same, because that is key. We want to have our trails and our lakes and our roads well taken care of, and we want to ensure that, well, that it can be enjoyed for generations. And so more land use planning with First Nations and local governments, and ensuring that we have adequate people on the ground, ensuring that people are actually following the rules out there, because it's the rule breakers that really mess it up for the rest of us.
Francyne?
Other than basically, I think we all have a responsibility to looking after these lands, because these lands around the Merritt, the Nicola Valley, they are beautiful, they're pristine. Just learned how to paddleboard at Kentucky Lake Aline this year, and the water is so blue. And when I'm back in Ontario, it's not nearly as beautiful as British Columbia is. That's why it's so nice to come home. But we have a responsibility to look after these lands. And it's not just one First Nation, one rancher, one community. We need to look after this collectively. We need to ensure that if these lands are not being looked after, that there is some sort of repercussions. We need to make sure that there's some accountability. Because as I drive down the Fraser Canyon and I'm seeing so much work being done, you also have to wonder what is being done sometimes to the garbage that goes into these areas. We have to look at the pollution that's going into our waters, into our grounds. What are we doing to stop this? What are we doing to ensuring that this land is being remediated? And what are we passing on to our future? I have a lot to agree with the Green Party on this one, so I'm just going to stop right there.
Awesome, thank you. This is going to be a controversial question. and maybe it shouldn't be, but it is. I actually have several questions regarding DRIPA. I said I was going to come back to it. So, some people think DRIPA is unfair, unfairly slanted towards the Indigenous peoples. Some people think it doesn't make sense to have anyone interfere in the governance of the Indigenous people. So, what are your thoughts? Is it fair? Is it balanced? Does it make sense? Should it be amended? And what's its overall importance to what we do in British Columbia? I'm going to start with you, because you brought it up originally.
I would actually prefer here my parties. Coming as a First Nation person, I've been living this all my life. So I would
Okay.
like to pass.
Who wants to go first? Okay. Jonah, go ahead.
Yeah, so the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, and what this act really does, I mean, it's a really short piece of legislation, just as a piece here. It really is what they call enabling legislation, which really lets the government do other stuff to their acts. And so the DRIPA, the Declaration Act, really allows the province to enter into agreements on shared decision-making, and it really highlights and embeds the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples into legislation here in BC. And so, is it fair? I mean, is it fair to uphold people's rights? And yeah, absolutely. Those are rights that are enshrined in the Constitution for Indigenous peoples, and it enables government to start doing bigger and better things. Like, that's how we got the Haida Agreement. That's how we're entering into other agreements with First Nations on the coast around how do we do things together as the province and Indigenous communities. And sorry, you asked a lot of questions there, Darcy. Is it fair? I think it's great. Should it be amended? It's very vague legislation. Like, when it was brought in, I forgot which chief said it, but he was speaking to a classroom of foresters at UBC. He said, DRIP has been brought in, but it hasn't changed anything on the land base. And that's because it's not supposed to. It's supposed to enable the province to do other things with legislation. It didn't have anything that changed the way we did things immediately, but it allowed us to do better things. And so that's why we are amending. That's why the NDP tried to amend the Land Act earlier. That's how they are amending, not the Water Sustainability Act, but there are other pieces of legislation like the Forests Act and the Forest and Range Practices Act that are being amended now because we have the Declaration Act. And so, is it good for the province? Absolutely. I think with the Declaration Act and with the amendments to the legislation, we are going to spend less time in court and spend less money on lawyers, and our permits are going to get through faster.
Thank you, Darcy. I think one of the biggest challenges has been around UNDRIP, which should have no room in Canada as far as I'm concerned. It's a United Nations declaration and it shouldn't have been brought into Canada. Having said that, we do need to have legislation to move this forward. We're lagging there. But I think the biggest problem this government and other governments have done is, how do you feel that you're in the dark on this whole thing? We're all in the dark on it because there hasn't been proper consultation. This government said, oh yeah, we consulted people on the Haida Bly piece, right? No, they didn't. They don't consult on anything. They don't consult, they think they don't have all the answers for healthcare. They have all the answers for crime and opiate disbursement, all those things. They do not consult with you, the public, who are paying the freight and having to adjust to all this. And as I said earlier, some of these things take time for everybody to work through and understand the ramifications, the repercussions, and all the things that we have to do through here, right? And I'm going to tell you, it's not just us, it's the First Nations. Some of the First Nations have struggles with some of these things too, from what I'm hearing out there. So it's not just us having struggle. I think the biggest thing we're lacking in this province, and it's done for a long time, is lack of consultation. Because I remember when they brought the DRIP, which is a huge, you here would deny that it's not a huge piece of legislation they brought in to change the way we lived in this province together. We need to consult on these things a lot more than we're doing. I remember I was upset when I heard that it went through the legislation, and wait a minute, my MLA didn't bring that to Merritt to discuss with me and to you and the First Nations. All of us get together to hear what the ramifications from it. So if I have one concern about this whole thing, is the lack of consultation and preparing us for the future, because none of us feel prepared for the future, do we? I don't. I'm sure most of you don't either, because we don't know. It's done in dark corners and secret closets. This kind of stuff comes out, we don't know it. So I'm really concerned about that, and I thought, if it's fair or balanced, I'm not sure at this particular point. What I need to know is I need to get better educated. I'm looking to be a politician, but I've told this before. I don't know everything. And especially when it comes to something like this, I need to learn as much as you do, and we need to find out how that's going to affect us moving forward with the First Nations, with ourselves, future generations, our children, and industry and business, because right now there's uncertainty in this province, and I'm sorry to hear that, and that's really bothering me a lot. We need that consultation piece.
Francyne, you get the last word on this one. Or maybe you don't. We'll see what.
But maybe I don't.
We'll see what happens.
I do believe consultation is very important. And this process of voting is so incredibly important. But when we talk about inequities, it's a very difficult one for me to swallow. Because my family, my community, has faced many inequities in their lifetime, and they were never consulted. It is now 2024, and we have, Indigenous people have had the right to vote for, what, 64 years now? Because before that, I never had any input as to what was going to happen in my community. St. George's, as many other residential schools, were filled with kids who were stolen from their families. There was no consultation on that either. I do believe in consultation. And I do believe that we can't just live in history, but we have to learn from our history. And being told what I can and cannot do, where I can and cannot do it, is not always easy. But if it's for the benefit of the community, it's something I've got to consider. I've been told all my life, oh, you are so lucky to be a First Nation. You get everything for free. And as Tony said, it's just a matter of education. And it's not his fault, he doesn't know, that I don't get everything for free. I pay taxes. I don't have a free house. I have to pay for my own health care. I have gotten one pair of free glasses in the last 20 years. So I'm not sure where this free stuff is, but I am just like everybody else in this room. I'm looking for a home. I'm looking for a job. But what I want to see, and what I am so proud that my grandfather taught me, is that as we move down into the future, we can do this together. I grew up with friends and family who helped out in our community. You know, when it's haying season, everybody goes out to run one ranch, and then you go to the other ranch, you help each other. Branding season, same thing. You help each other. And this land has been settled by our ancestors for eons. And I would never turn my back on people. My grandfather, he used to welcome the gypsies into Merritt. I used to think these were the coolest people in the world. But my grandmother said, don't take the chickens, leave the chickens alone. We can ensure that as we go down, and as we need more homes, as we need more jobs, we need to decide together how are we going to pursue it. There needs to be some land set aside for agricultural purposes, for food production, for cattle production, for tourism, but we need to make these decisions together, and we need to respect each other through this process. Because without that respect, I'm sorry, but we're going to become far more like Trump than I would like to see. And that's just not us. Thank you.
Thank you all. A couple more questions. Hopefully you guys aren't too bored yet. I'm going to say one word, and I'm going to let you guys talk about whatever you want to talk about on this topic. That word is housing. And if you want to debate somebody on it, I'm right here. Go ahead. Housing. Jonah?
Absolutely. Housing is probably, well, right after healthcare, the second biggest issue that I hear from people at the door. And I'm proud to say that the BC Greens have a plan. We want to build 26,000 new units a year. That's our goal. And that would be above whatever the private sector is building. And I know that that's a tough sell. Like that's, my wife works for the district of Lillooet. She works in their building permit department. And permits take a long time to get through the system. I absolutely get that. And there are ways to make that more efficient. And part of that is ensuring and making sure that the province is partnering with nonprofits and municipalities to ensure that the houses that are built through this program are non-market housing, to ensure that everyone can afford it. Because it's no sense in building an amazing, 26-unit apartment in downtown Merritt if nobody can afford to live in there except for real investors. That's my first applause. Yeah, like we want it non-market because we found whenever you build a new apartment in any, Vancouver, Victoria, Nanaimo, Kamloops, over half of the units get scooped up by investment companies. Housing is for people, not for profits.
You guys want to flip a coin as to who goes next?
Don't have no two-headed coins, but just take it down. Housing is incredibly important there. I grew up in a household with my grandparents, my mom, my uncles, myself, and I had a lot of cousins that came by to visit. I was so excited when I was finally able to get my own bedroom. That is the best feeling in the world. To get your own bed, to get your own bedroom. And I'm so happy to be able to find a unit where I could raise my own kids. And it's been a very difficult situation. And as I mentioned, coming back to Merritt, it was difficult to find any sort of rental. The price of housing it's crazy. It's nuts, and it's getting worse as more and more people are moving from the Lower Mainland, coming into our community and raising the prices of homes. I thought at this stage of my life, I'd own my own home. I make good money, and I don't own my home. And I am paying for someone else's mortgage, because I'm paying $2,000 a month. What we need to see, obviously, is more housing, more affordable housing. And I'm pleased to see that there have been some strides being made in Merritt. We have seen 2 living complexes, over 100 units built. Some of these units, they need to be more family targeted. I understand that. Some of these units need to be focused more on affordability, but I also understand, as I'm trying to renovate my mother's house, construction costs are expensive. Services are expensive, wood is expensive, the lighting is expensive. But we need to have a plan to work together to make sure that we can each have a roof over our head, hot water coming out of our taps, and a place to raise our family. So I'm committed to make sure that we are working together to address this situation. And I'd like to see everyone with a home who wants a home here in Merritt. Thank you.
This one's close to my heart as a realtor, right? And a homeowner. I'll be giving up my religious position if I get elected to, by the way. So there's no conflict there, okay? That was a big issue before. So housing is such a complex issue, as we know, right? Interest rates, land costs, the red tape, all those kind of things. Let me just give you a couple of statistics around housing costs. And I know the Green Party is sincere when they say we're going to build 26,000 units a way. I think Mr. Trudeau back east said he's going to do 100,000 units a year. None has been built yet. Why? Because it's so complex and you take a huge risk doing it, and it's very complex, as I said. So to build a house today in British Columbia, one third land costs, 1/3 to build it, and 1/3 government red tape. All us politicians are standing up and we want to build these houses faster, but I've never heard one of them come out and say, hey, here's how we're going to cut the red tape and get this built. When I ran for mayor here last term, I was saying, when I was on council, I said, be very, very careful. We've got to get our system unstuck, or the provincial government is going to take control. That came to fruition, didn't it? Because we did within our own cities. We're having problems within our city and getting things moving as well, not just in all the cities and everything. One of the things we don't want to do as a province is force cities to go to the mandates that the NDP government has brought in, because that's not how you do it either, because there's pushback and resistance to that. This government's been taking our land rights away and our freedoms of how we use our land. 60 to 70 years of jurisprudence has been out the window because they say, hey, we don't care if you have an STR and you bought that for retirement or for a little bit of extra income. We're telling you that you must now rent it out full time. But that's not what I want, because I don't want my tenants kicking the crap out of it. They want to change the way they're doing things, right? So there's just so many complex issues and so many things that go on here that the people as well. In Alberta, so one of the problems, so we got 1/3. Land is very, very expensive in the province of British Columbia, as you know, and that kind of thing. In Alberta, if they want more land to expand their cities, they go to the provincial government, put a request in, Provincial government looks at it, comes back and says, yeah, okay, you got 100 more acres in your city, so you can build some more housing. That doesn't happen in the province of British Columbia. So land costs will go up, right? Less than 5% of this province is owned by private ownership. Did you know that? 95% of this is forests, mining areas, grasslands and all that king. So when I was born in 1955, there was 1 million people in the province. We're touching almost 6 million people vying for that same 5% of the land in the province. Where do you think, for economists, you know what the answer is? Supply and demand, right? Supply goes down, prices go up. And this is what's been happening all over the province. We're running out of land to build on. We have a fear of densifying, and I don't disagree with you. You know, densifying isn't very nice of a big apartment that goes up beside you and everything. But these are just some of the issues around housing. So when we get a party or a government or a candidate says, hey, we're going to build 26,000, how are you going to do it? You're running a $9 billion deficit. Where's the money coming from? You're going to add more to that debt. So these are not simple answers to be able to simple questions and bring answers to, right? We've got a lot of work to do around that housing piece. I think I wrote down another thought about that. When somebody mentioned, hey, housing's not for profit, many of you moved up from the Lower Mainland because you had profit in the house that you bought down in the Lower Mainland. Sorry, we're all involved in taking profit out of our housing. I don't care what anybody says, right? So, I mean, profit's just part of the piece, and that's because of regulations, everything that's driven up the cost. Some of us have been lucky, for those that moved down, they're able to capture some money. Even here in Merritt now, like the price of housing. So some of you are making profits on your house. So it's not a dirty word. Profit's good because that incentivizes people to build housing. I don't disagree with Jonah. If we want to have a less than market rate housing, then we got to have the proper rules and regulation that the person that buys that house cannot make a profit on it. And there is ways of doing that. They buy this in 5 years, they have to sell it back to the state for the same price they bought it for. Boom, there you go. So there's ways of taking that profit out of there. It just has to be worked through with regulation, if that's what we want. It's always about coming down to, is that what we want, right? Do we want the state running our housing in that way? So that's all I'm saying, if that's how we want, right? So there is many complex things around housing. Yeah, I probably said enough on that one, so I'll leave it at that for now. But it's a complex issue.
We're going to do one more fun round. So, climate change and the carbon tax. Now, there's a lot of discussion about this. I'm not going to do a long preamble about it. Climate change is real. I think we all recognize that. What we're doing about it is something different. And honestly, the climate has been changing since the Earth was born. Sometimes it gets hotter, sometimes it gets colder.
I'm going to take your word on that.
There was an ice age.
Well, since you're born, I was like 7.
Not since I was born. Since the Earth was born. So, climate changes. Of course it does. Bundle that in with one of the policies that was meant to address that, and that's the carbon tax. I know everybody has thoughts on it. So, what are yours? Let's not talk about what the party leader said. Let's hear from you what your thoughts are on what we can do about climate change and what we should do with the controversial carbon tax. Who wants to go first? Nobody. Tony, you go first.
The carbon tax. I have never agreed with it under the way it was brought in, the way it was done. British Columbia came probably the closest to having a proper carbon tax, because what we're trying to do is tax our emissions, tax the pollutants and that kind of thing in the air. The jury's still out of CO2s that are a pollutant or are part of the growing piece here on the planet, because people pump it into greenhouses to grow their plants. So I'm not sure why we're attacking carbon or CO2. So anyway, that here nor there on that one. But I've never agreed with it the way it was done. When I guess it was the Liberal Party, BC Liberal Party brought it in, they did what most economists say about the carbon tax. It has to be revenue neutral. So you pay at the pump, you pay that, and then it's supposed to come back to you as a credit, right? And that's the way it should be done everywhere. But guess what governments do? They see $3.6 billion a year coming in from the carbon tax, and guess what? They're going to spend it some way, somehow, and not get it back to you. Anybody here receive a credit lately? There's no credits coming back to you, so that's the wrong system, the way to do it. So if we went back, maybe that's something I could probably stomach a little bit more. But as our leader John Rusted said, and I agree with them, and I've always said this, you're not going to change the climate by taxing us into poverty. It's killing our industries, it's killing our agriculture. That is why John Rusted got kicked out of the United Party, that's what they call themselves, the United Party, because he disagreed, finally saw the vision, talked to his farmers up north. They can't make it. They're having to pay this huge carbon tax and everything. And at the end of the day, who pays the carbon tax? It's you and me buying your vegetables, buying your foodstuffs at the store. But it filters down and becomes very inefficient when they do that kind of thing. So no, I do not agree with the carbon tax. One of the other things why I don't disagree with the carbon tax or any kind of tax like there is, there's been no accountability on any of this. Government, as far as I'm concerned, should be a lot more accountable to you, the citizens. We should be demanding, okay, you've taken $3.6 billion, okay, if you return to me to credit, accounting's simple, really simple, I get it back. But if you're putting the general revenues, what are you doing to change the climate? What are you doing, and I think this is the word that really needs to be thinking about, is adapting. I think we're foolish to think that we are going to change the weather with a small carbon tax. But how are we adapting? How are we building our infrastructure stronger along the rivers? How are we making our forest more fire resistant? What are we doing to it? And I want accounting that. I want to know, hey, we collected $3.6 billion. $1 billion went to forest restoration. $1 billion went to diking. $1 billion went here, whatever. That's what I want out of a government. I want more accountability, and I want more truth from them about what they're doing with some of these things. Do I believe in climate change? Yes, of course I do. Things are changing. Hard to explain some of the things that are going on. And we have, as Darcy said, we've had ice ages, we've had deserts, we've had ice ages all along. This too may pass, I don't know, but it's not going to be in my lifetime, I'm sure, right? But yeah, I think we need to do a lot more work around that piece and make sure that we've got the right stuff in now and hold our governments to account. Back in Ottawa, I think they've collected or spent over $60 billion on climate change things, stuff, whatever they're doing. Not one single report, no cost-benefit analysis, nothing on the money that they're taking from you and spending on this. That doesn't make sense to me. Never mind me being a politician, as a taxpayer, somebody that's paying that freight, I don't like it. I hope you don't like it either.
Jonah said I could go next because I thought he would probably have more than I would have to say here, but on a personal level, not thinking about what David Eby has to say about this, not thinking about what Trudeau has to say about this, but the carbon tax, yeah, climate change is a thing. That's what's giving me my job right now, because I work in First Nations Emergency Services. And we're not dealing just with fire, we're dealing with flood, we're dealing with mudslides. Now we're looking at tsunamis. And when we go into these areas all around the province, I'm seeing that there is, back to the equity, there's no equity on this. It's unfair for me, who tries to do her best to do recycling, to buy secondhand. It's pretty good secondhand, I thought. But, I try to take steps to make sure that I'm doing my part. And it really irks me when I see someone else not care. When you go into the back roads and you see someone toss their refrigerator in the back roads and there's no accountability. But I also know that for us to move ahead, we have to work together. And nothing is free in life, we know that. But we also need to hold, as Tony mentioned, each other accountable. And it's not always the individuals or the families, but it's the corporations we need to hold accountable. And it's not just, it's not just the government we have to hold accountable, it's ourselves. Because I don't want to be part of a system that ignores what I'm passing on to my kids, to my children. I want to make sure that I'm stepping up and I'm saying, hey, I don't agree with what's going on here, and I want you to address it. I want you to be respectful of what we are doing here, and I want to have positive change take place. And I feel like at this point I'm starting to ramble, I'm forgetting the question here, my apologies here, but I do feel that we need to do something by collecting funds and making accountability priority for our kids, to make sure that our environment is being dealt with, managed, and I'm going to stop right there. Thank you.
You have nothing to say about this, do you?
No.
Okay, I didn't think so.
Go. I mean, climate change is real, it's human caused. We've all seen the hockey stick curve on emissions. I don't need to talk about the science. It's worrying that some parties are calling climate change just weather, and thinking that, the tax is trying to change the weather. That's not what it is. And the fact is, the carbon tax rebate is based on your income. So the less you make, the more rebate you get back at the end of the day. And what happened with Premier Horgan when he came into power, though, was he changed how that worked. He took some off and used it to fund green initiatives, so transit and that kind of thing. And what I think we should be doing is making bigger polluters pay more so that we pay less in the end. Because if we axe the tax, we're going to pay the price in the end. Whether that's through needing to build more infrastructure, whether that's dikes or fire-safe communities. It's worrying to me that we're now talking about, okay, we can't stop climate change and we don't want to do anything about it, so let's just prevent that, that flood from happening or damaging so many communities, because it's not equitable for people in the province, because the wealthy are going to be the ones that escape the true effects of climate change, and the normal people like us in this room, we are going to be the ones that face the brunt. I mean, there's nothing we can do about smoky skies. I have a 6-month-old at home. I was very thankful that we didn't have smoke-filled skies all summer, because it's showing that kids now get asthma from all the smoke in the air. How are we going to stop that from affecting our children without keeping them inside in a HEPA-filtered bubble all summer? That's not a childhood I want my kids to have, and I hope it's not a childhood that you want your kids to have, or your grandkids. And it's frustrating seeing the effects of climate change and not. That's one of the reasons I'm running, is because there are solutions that we can enact here. And there's no reason why BC can't be the heat pump center of the world. We should be exporting our technical expertise and driving down emissions elsewhere. People say we're a small province, we're a small population, we don't contribute that much globally, but that doesn't mean that we can't be that producer to drive down emissions elsewhere. We've done it before, not with emissions, but we've been the factory of the world before in World War II, and we were able to upscale and meet that challenge head on. And we can do it again if we invest in good green infrastructure, energy. There's no reason why we can't be a greater net exporter of green energy. There's no reason why we can't export heat pumps and wind turbines. We're talking about jobs, and good paying jobs, and trade jobs. Factory workers get paid very well, especially when we're exporting that to the world. Wind turbine engineers, and engineers to build dams and solar, and those are all really good paying jobs, and they're sustainable jobs. And we're seeing that in the riding. People are building solar farms up in Highland Valley on old mine sites. That is an excellent use of that land, once all the copper's been mined out, to utilize that land for a greater purpose. And so, I think, as British Columbians, as myself, I think there's a really big and great opportunity for us to step up and actually solve the problem instead of contributing to it. And part of that is, right now, the carbon tax, and really the carbon tax is the conservative solution to climate change. That is the most market-friendly way. Like, if we really got serious and thought climate change was a serious crisis, like a lot of our leaders say it is, but then they don't act on it, we would be doing so much more than a carbon tax. And I think we would start to see the effects of it in our daily lives if we did that. But people, we can't even get a carbon tax passed in this country. And like the European Union won't sign trade deals with countries without carbon pricing. So if we don't have carbon pricing set into our systems in Canada and in BC, who are we going to trade with? We're going to be a pariah on the national stage. We're going to be able to trade with, like, I don't know, the United States. Like, exactly, right? It's like, yes, but Europe is also, who's buying all of our wood? It's not the United States. It's Europe and Japan. Exactly. And so where are we going to be exporting? Where are we going to be trading with? We need to be thinking about that. And President Biden has also brought in budgets to ensure that they want carbon pricing in their trade partners as well. And so if we continue to be laggards on this issue, we are going to be isolated and we are going to be prized on the international stage. But we can change that. We can build great economies, we can be green, we can export our energy, we have the expertise, we have the technology, we just need a government and the leaders to do it. And that's why I'm running for BC Greens.
Okay, you guys are getting tired, right? You're exhausted. No, it was easy on you, believe me. I want to close with a piece of advice. I don't know which one of you is getting elected. I wish you all luck. The advice that I'm going to give you is the advice that I give every politician that I meet with. You are surrounded with people who care. This building is full of people who care. Whatever you do in your political career, listen to these folks. There's brilliant minds in this building. There's brilliant minds in your riding. And listen especially to those who have different ideas than your own. Because that's how you're going to grow. That's how you're going to be an effective leader. On behalf of the Merritt District Chamber of Commerce, I would like to thank you for your time, your effort, your energy. All of you as well for your time, patience, and all the amazing questions you asked.
Darcy, we want to thank you too for being an excellent moderator. Thank you for all coming here. This is a tough thing to do. Not up here, down there, listen to us pontificate all day. So thank you very much for coming in.
Before these guys all run out of here, I'm going to give them 1 minute for their final thought. Francine, we'll start with you again. 1 minute to give your final thoughts to the group.
1 minute, over time, okay. So, coming back to this community, everything comes to me, and I've loved and having the chance to hear the concerns tonight and the last few weeks around this fight has really impressed upon me that this is no easy job. And I respect the work that Jackie Taylor did before us, and I respect that the work that either one of my counterparts will do in the future. And I do hope that if I do get elected, that you will continue to embrace and keep in touch with me. I promise to continue listening to what you want to say.
Darcy, you said it right. Like, this is a room full of passionate people, and all of us are passionate about being servants. And that's one of the reasons why I'm running, is because I want to put the servant back in public servant. I feel like we have too many leaders right now who want to elevate themselves and puff themselves up. And I think really we need a humble leader, but we also need brave people in Victoria, in Ottawa, in Merritt, in Willow. Like, we need brave people all over the riding, all over the world, ready to make those tough choices and do that hard work. Because good work is very rarely ever easy work. And so I'm frustrated, and I feel the frustration in the room. Like, we know the solutions to the problems that we're facing. We just need somebody to listen. And so that's why I'm running as a Green. And I said it a few times. One of my main role being your MLA would be to listen to you and represent you and advocate for you and your town, your way of life, your occupation, your friends and family.
Thank you, Darcy. I had a few written notes here, and I'll probably just run through this here quickly. I think this is going to be a very, very important election moving forward. I think this is one of the more important elections we've had in a very, very long time. There is a lot of issues in this province that are affecting all of us, and I think it's really, really important that we get involved. And thank you again so much for coming out. But I believe this is one of the most important elections we've had in BC in a long time. This is not just a vote about policies. It's a vote against political philosophy and ideology. It's a choice between more of the same, a broken healthcare system, rampant drug use, rising crime and affordability and housing crisis. Or it's a movement back to the way it used to be. A movement toward free enterprise, a thriving economy, a strong agricultural sector, and a smaller, more efficient government. These things must come to pass, or we're in trouble. The BC Conservative Party stands for real change, a change that empowers families, restores common sense government, and focus on creating opportunities for everyone. We're going to do what is right for British Columbians. The choice is clear: more of the same, or a better, brighter future for British Columbia. I trust the people of this great province to make the right choice moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much. And this has been fun for me. So thank you all for coming out. Thank you for being the informed and educated among our population. And make sure you get out and vote. October 19th is not that far away. Thank you so much. Everyone stay there.